My name is Julie Pearson, Little Thunder. Today is Tuesday, April 7th, 2015, and I'm interviewing Yonavea Hawkins for the Oklahoma Native Artist Project, sponsored by the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program at Oklahoma State University. We're in Yonavea's home in Choctaw, Oklahoma, outside of Oklahoma City. Yonavea, you've graduated from Oklahoma City University, and your art is expressed in many areas, in painting, beading, weaving. While you excel at Caddo and Delaware clothing, you get orders for dance clothes from people all over from Oklahoma. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me.
Thank you.
Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in San Antonio, Texas. My dad was in the Air Force, and so I was a military brat until my folks separated at the age of 10. And so I spent most of my time kind of going back and forth to different grade schools and stuff in different states. And then finally settled back here in Oklahoma with my mother and my sister.
So you did a little bit of traveling.
Yes, yes, yeah. Actually lived in Montana and when I lived in Arkansas, and 2 different trips into back to Texas and stuff too. And also, I don't remember it, I was pretty little, we lived in the Canal Zone also.
So in Panama?
So my middle sister was actually born there in Panama City.
What a great upbringing.
So,
what did your mom then do for a living?
She was a homemaker. You know, she at that time, the wife stayed at home, and so she didn't work at all while growing up. She was a homemaker.
How about your grandparents? Were you able to have a relationship with them on either side?
When we moved back to Oklahoma, I had a chance to spend some time with my grandfather. My grandparents separated too, and so he remarried. He remarried a Kickapoo woman and lived outside of here. And so there was quite a few summers that we'd get to go stay with them and just, run around barefoot and climb trees and just have a good time just being young and stuff. My grandpa didn't have, he just had a little bitty home, no indoor plumbing, no running water. So I had the experiences of, pumping water to bring it into the house and stuff. And
wow.
So it was just kind of interesting, looking back on that. It was a very interesting but a good experience and stuff. And I remember in the summer times we'd sleep outside and because it was warm. And, he would tell stories, Caddo stories and stuff. And being little, don't remember them as well as I would have liked to, but I do remember that experience of sitting outside, hearing the bugs and everything else going on in the nighttime, and just hearing him, tell those stories and stuff.
And were you around the language then a little bit too when you were around him?
Just a tiny bit. He'd say a few words and stuff, and the same thing with my mother.
So you were mentioning that being around that side of the family, you did hear a little bit of the language.
A little bit, not as much as I would have liked to. As an adult now, knowing that I just don't always think about asking questions when you're young. And now as an adult, we started doing some language classes here in Oklahoma City, and so I've started participating in those. So it's harder to learn as an adult.
That's with the Caddo Cultural Club.
We call it the Caddo Language Class, and some of the members of the Metro Caddo Cultural Club are involved with it, and we get together. We've been doing it for about 2 years now, and have been, studying weekly. And fortunately, the first 2 years we didn't think of calling it a beginner class, but this year, the 3rd year, we developed a beginner class and an intermediate class. We don't want to call it advanced, because we don't feel like we're that proficient and stuff. But
it's great that you now have 2 different
enough to
levels.
Get those kids interested and develop more programs. I shouldn't say programs, but lessons.
Right.
And then the Caddo kids and stuff that are involved, they've been doing the Caddo Language Fair, and they've been doing very well too. So that makes us very proud. We're kind of behind, doing some of those things and stuff. One, we're not a very large nation, and not as many native speakers, of course, and I think that's true with any tribe. They don't have as many native speakers as they really would like to and stuff. Mm-hmm. And instituted a lot of programs and stuff that I think, you know, the Caddos could take a look at and try to take advantage of and try to develop their own programs too.
And you have a neat story about your name, your first name.
Yes, yes. Yonavea is actually a Comanche name, and my grandmother wanted to name me that, and she went to the family. She was good friends with a Comanche woman, and that was her name. And so she asked permission to name me that name, and that's why I'm a Caddo, Delaware Kickapoo Indian with a Comanche name.
With all your tribal heritages, has there been one that's been more dominant than the other?
Interesting enough, my mother, though raised by her grandmother, who was Delaware, she knew how to make Caddo clothes as well as Delaware clothes, and that's where the influence lies. More so on the Caddo side, because we were involved with the Caddo dances and the cultural events, and so I know more about my Caddo side. Not as much as I would like to know on the Delaware side. My grandmother was, my grandpa remarried, and so he married a Kickapoo woman, so there were some of the things called the Kickapoo side that I got a chance to learn about and know too. So, you know, Delaware, I know how to make those clothes.
Right.
You know.
What was the first time that you were conscious of seeing Native art?
Maybe more so when we came back to Oklahoma as a child. I always liked to draw and paint, and always enjoyed, you know, the art classes that they would have in the grade schools and stuff. I mean, you know, it wasn't per se a particular art class, but it was more like a craft or a project as part of the curriculum. That was probably more my influence when we came back to Oklahoma, seeing some of the things that were going on at that time.
When did you make your first art?
In grade school, I got a chance to be part of they must have been having an art show. I was probably about 10, and I remember drawing a cat. And it was, you know, just the head and stuff, and it was in pencil. So obviously I have a lot of influence with drawing with pencil and stuff. So that was my first art experience.
Were you around beadwork or people making clothing like in your extended family?
Just my mother. When we came back to Oklahoma, we started being involved with some of the Caddo events. And that was my experience there. She made her dresses. She didn't do beadwork. She didn't do moccasins. And with her, she liked to sew, but she didn't like the cutting out of the clothes. And so that was me and my sister's jobs, was to cut out the clothes, and then she would sew our clothes up. So I understood at least the cutting out process, but not the sewing.
How about any outstanding art memories in middle school or high school?
You know, I always took the art classes and stuff, but it wasn't until in college that I entered another competition and placed. It was at the American Indian Exposition when they had the art shows and stuff. And so that was another exposure to being in the competitions. And so I think I won second and third in graphics with pen and ink.
That's very exciting. And you were how old then?
I was probably 19, about 19 and stuff, and I was also a tribal princess that year too, so that's why
Wow.
both of those things together stick in my mind. And then it was more college that I started getting involved with the competition and stuff. It just so happened there was competitions going on, and so I participated.
So you started off at OCU, is that right?
Yes, I did.
Enrolled as a fine arts major?
Yes, I was. I went in and thought, well, I wanted to be a fine arts major and do all the paintings and stuff. And I really liked it, but about halfway through I thought, well, maybe I need to have something else to support me. And so I started doing graphic design, took the commercial art classes and stuff that they had, and went on professionally to be a graphic designer.
That's a great background to bring into your artwork. So, your first couple of jobs, are you both working full-time in graphic design and also pursuing your art on the side, or?
Actually, what happened, I went into the graphic design, did that for several years, and that was a creative outlet, doing the graphic design professionally. And then became a mother, and kind of job-wise switched into not much creative process, but the pre-press, the production part, preparing things for printing and going on a lot of press checks and stuff. And so by that point, my kids were needing Halloween clothes. I was making baby clothes, and so that was still a creative outlet to do the sewing and stuff for my kids. And about the time they got into grade school, they were showing an interest in dancing. And because up to that point I hadn't been participating culturally as much because I was focused on my career and my kids. And they said, well, we want to dance. And it was like, well, how do you want to dance? Do you want to, and I pointed to a straight dancer, and then I pointed to a fancy dancer. And of course they wanted to be fancy dancers. And, it's like, well, I don't know anybody that makes those things, and so I ended up making their bustles.
Oh, wow.
And I still have them here too. But it was an interesting experience, and that before then I had made my own clothes. Getting married and stuff, I had put on weight, and so I had to learn how to make my own clothes, and that's where I started making my moccasins and my dashtu and my beads, everything that a Caddo woman would wear, because I started with myself. And then my sons come along, and so I start with their bustles. Fortunately, they wanted to start straight dancing, so then I had to learn how to make straight dance clothes, for my sons, and their moccasins and all those things that men wear.
When did you sort of get involved in the art circuit again?
It wasn't till 2010 when Jerry Redcorn asked me to participate at Red Earth at the, she wanted to do a Caddo co-op. And at that time, of course, I had my own things, and I had a pair of moccasins that I was working on for myself. And I thought, well, I'll put those into the competition. And because I saw there was a competition, and it was part of the booth, and I assumed that you had to enter into the competition to be a participant in an art market. Shows you how much I knew at that time. But fortunately, I entered those in, and it was a good experience for me. I won, in the beadwork category, and I wasn't aware really that that's a really stiff competition area, because Oklahoma's known for their beadworkers. And so I was very blessed that I entered in my Delaware moccasins, and I placed. So I was really thrilled, and that was the start. That was the start of me participating at Red Earth. I did that for several years at just Red Earth, and then the past 2 years I've expanded to other art markets and stuff, and have been blessed to have also placed in the beadwork and cultural items categories.
Now, was that first show, was that in the 90s, or was that already?
It was 2010.
2010.
I'm really a newbie at this.
And a whole life's experience, right, that you're bringing to it.
Exactly.
What painting media did you start out in?
I liked doing acrylics. Did more pencil drawings and pen and ink, and realized that I really enjoyed drawing more so than painting. Not that I can't paint. I still feel like I'm learning on my painting techniques and stuff. But drawing with pencil and charcoal and pen and ink has always been my favorite medium. And I like doing people. I just like people's faces, and capturing their expressions and stuff.
And we'll take a look at a couple of those nice ones at the end here. You also took a pottery class with Chase Earls, is that right?
Yes, Chase had been talking about wanting to teach, other Caddos about Caddo pottery and stuff. I think we forget there's so many different Caddo pots and other items that belong to the Caddos, not realizing the Caddos were, a very large nation at one time and occupied a lot of land mass. And a lot of our items are in museums that you don't always see, they're in the collections. And he had been learning from Jerry and now has taken off on his own with his knowledge and experience and his experimentation of learning how to fire and do wood fires. And most people don't realize the difference between southeastern pottery and southwestern pottery. It's a different firing technique, different clays, which required that firing technique. And we went to his home. In fact, one of my sons went with me, and we learned how to grind up the clay and make the clay mix. Then we went back and had some firing. Also got a chance to actually work with the clay, and had Chase show me how to, this is how you do it. And so I'm pretty proud of my first pot. It was like, okay, it's not too bad. It's it's not too crooked, and it's acceptable enough. I had one of them at the Tulsa Art Market, and I had a gentleman come up and he goes, "This looks really old," and I said, "It's not." I just did it a couple months ago, just fired it and everything else. And he wanted to buy it, but I said, "It's my first pot." So.
Oh, okay. So where did you fire that one? Did you fire it at Chase's?
At Chase's home and stuff. I've gone through 2 pit firings, and so now I understand about how to at least build the fire and how to warm up your pots so that you can actually, come out with a pot. And, he takes pictures and stuff because he says, people don't always believe that you pit fired.
Right.
So it's like, okay, take pictures of my pots. These are the ones I pit fired.
we hope to see more pots too then. So you're making clothing for yourself and your sons when they start to dance, and then did you start getting commissions even then when you were a young mother for Indian clothes?
Actually, no, because I never said too much about it, and more of the commissions and stuff have occurred, since my, starting out at Red Earth and stuff, because I have pictures of my clothing, and I would have people come and ask me, women or would ask me if I'd make some clothes for their, make a shirt for their husband, and would have men ask me about making straight dance clothes and stuff. So I had Tim Tallchief asked me, he said, "Could you make some, Osage ribbon work?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I think so." I'm pretty brave, I can look at something and,
right.
and figure it out. And so I ended up doing one of his, he said, "This is a family design, could you duplicate it?" And so I made some straight dance clothes for him, and now I'm starting to get more orders for straight dance clothes, as well as women's Caddos dresses and, children's clothing and stuff too, so.
And I didn't get to ask you, when you made your first pair of moccasins, did you learn from anybody, or did you just figure that out?
No, I did. I tried to do some research. I didn't have anybody teach me. I did, I would look at examples that, I would find on the, in the museums and on the internet, different sources, and look at those. And, I'd cut them, and then I'd just like, well, those don't quite look right. And so I'd take them apart and recut them and restitch them, and, just learned on my own about the construction and stuff and how they should fit properly. And then, like I said, went on with making my sons. I can see the big difference from the first pairs I made to what I make now.
Right.
That trial and error.
Right. And it's hard to, people are paying better prices, even dancers, for moccasins, but very labor intensive.
They really are, and it's funny sometimes. Someone will say, "Well, how much are those?" And it's like, "Well, it's this much." And I said, "It does take some hours and stuff." And then you have some people say, "Well, I could do that myself," and it's like, "Okay, go ahead. you know, you're not hurting my feelings, you know, one bit.
What you know, you're as you're getting into the business, that kind of is the tricky part of it. You know, how you decide how you're going to price things. What kinds of research were you doing? Were you just observing other artists, people who are making?
Because I try to keep traditional, I would look at museums, you know, the collections I would see in museums, whatever was on exhibit and stuff. And one of the things I discovered about what's traditional, tradition is sustained by material availability. If the materials aren't there, you can't be traditional. And human nature being what it is, you use what's available. You know, and so things that are traditional now weren't traditional 100 years ago. I had the opportunity to be asked to give a presentation on Caddo clothing, and because of that I did more research, you know, looking at written material that was available and descriptions that were there in these written accounts of what Caddos were wearing. And at one time, you know, we wore black buckskin. We don't wear black buckskin anymore. I don't think I've never seen a black buckskin in my lifetime. You know, I wish I had my grandmother here. You know, I could ask.
Mm-hmm.
But the descriptions were from the Spanish explorers, and it was black buckskin with white seeds, decorated with white seeds. Fortunately, I had a chance to go to Alto, Texas, and they had, you know, it was a replica from the descriptions and stuff on some of the in their displays, and it's like, you know, this is one of those things that if I actually made one of those dresses, then it was like, you know, what kind of outfit is that? You know, even today, wearing a Caddo dress, I'll get asked, you know, what tribe are you? You know, what kind of clothing are you wearing? You know, because we are such a small tribe. The funniest experience I had in Ada, I was at a powwow and I was dressed in my Caddo dress. I think at that time I was wearing probably my two-piece. Whether it was a one-piece or two-piece, I still had on my Caddo comb. And I had a little girl come up to me and she goes, "Your crown's on backwards." And it's like, okay, she's never seen a Caddo woman before.
Right.
She doesn't know that that's part of our traditional dress, is to wear those combs. And, you know, going back to the fact of the cost of silver work, you're not going to see those Caddo combs or as much silver work as what you used to. You know,
Right.
but it was kind of funny, and I leaned down and told her, I said, I'm Caddo, we wear our combs this way.
And I'm glad you brought up those points about tradition. So when you're actually making clothes to sell, when you first started out, in terms of knowing how to price things, were you sort of looking at perhaps other people? And I don't imagine there were a lot of people, for example, making dashtos or what.
No.
Or were you just gauging your time?
Gauging my time.
And materials.
Yeah, time and materials. That's my best rule of thumb, especially if it's on a new project. I try to keep it within reason of what I think, you know, it'll take the time for me to do. There's a lot of times I underestimate. You know, I get carried away with, you know, the detail of it, you know, and, you know, 100 years from now, someone's going to come across something that I made, you know, and I want it to hold up. You know, I still want it to be there 200 years from now.
You know, and I was thinking too that even just like the art of sewing, even just sewing with a sewing machine, there's so many, that's kind of a lost art anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I think Indian women are really keeping that alive in a way.
Right. we can't go to the store to find our clothes. You have to know someone who makes them, and to be able to find that person. I mean, that was the same issues I had. It's like, I've got to, I want these things, but I don't know who to ask to make those for me. So I guess fortunately, at least I can do things with my hands. And God gave me a talent, and a skill, and so I'm able to use those things for myself, for my family, and now for other people too. That just recently I had someone ask me if I would make the little girl her Caddo dress, her first Caddo dress, and so it's real hard to not make that time for those first clothes for those younger ones. The same way with these straight dance clothes that I just got finished doing. They're for young boys, and it's like if I don't make that time when they're interested in doing it, it's lost. It's a lost opportunity. It's something they may not pick up and want to do again, while that interest is there. I did the same thing, about 6 months ago for another young lady that, she wanted to have her Indian clothes, and she was like rediscovering who she was. So those things are important. Adults that have already been dancing and that kind of stuff, I don't. It's probably bad of me to say, but I don't work them in as quickly because they're adults. They're already participating. I take in a lot of commission work and stuff, and so I try to work that in and be fair to those people, but those younger people really kind of get it their priority in first.
I really appreciate what you're saying there. Have you done any museum shows at all?
I have been down to Alto, the Caddo Mounds. They asked me to come down there several years ago to show some of the Caddo clothing and stuff, and so go just about every other year. In fact, I'll be next weekend. I'll be going down there. They kind of changed the dates from October to April, and so I'll go down there and talk to the people that come through there and stuff. And in that area, a lot of the kids study the Caddo Indians because we're native to that area. And because the Caddo Indians are there, they'll come in and talk and ask questions and stuff. And a couple of years ago, I had a young lady that I was visiting with, and was sharing with her, and then she came back the following year and showed me her history project that she had won with, based on the Caddo Indians, and she was so very proud of it. And I was very proud too that she had won, and that she had also taken the time and the opportunity to come back and show me what she had done too. So that was great.
That is really neat. You inspired her. What was it like the first time you went down there?
It was interesting. Fortunately, I guess, being at powwows, because I do like to powwow and go to other dances and participate in other events. So I'm kind of used to the tourists coming up and want to take their pictures with me and stuff. And so it wasn't like a totally different experience. The people there were, wanting to learn about Caddo, so that's what they're there for. They were interested, and so their questions were pretty good. Now, as always, there's always somebody humorous that kind of sticks in your mind. I had, got the usual questions of, is that what you wear at home every day? And you just smile and say, no, I wear regular street clothes. I have a regular job. So all you can do is just smile.
Right.
These are my Indian clothes. Yes, I am Indian, but, I do work professionally.
When you go to art shows, does your husband go, or your sons, or is it just...
Yes, my husband is very supportive. He's my biggest booster. He helps me set up, and if I feel like the need to go look at other things and stuff, he comes and he stays with me. He stays in the booth and, gives me a break to let me get out and take a look and see what's going on out there. And of course, with art shows and stuff, Sometimes they're suppliers, and so it's like, I think I need more beads.
Right.
So he's really great. My sons do, they come and they stay in the booth and stuff, and they enjoy that part of it also. So my family really supports me in that. I'm fortunate.
When did you start your website, and how important has that been in marketing your work?
I started my website probably in 2011, I guess, 2012. You know, I'd have people ask me, you know, do you have a website? I don't sell off my website. You know, I worry about the commercialism that happens when you put too much out there as far as Native American designs, the copyright issues. Show a few things on there. I get, you know, people that contact me, ask me if, you know, if I could do this or that for them. Most of my opportunities seem to come from some of the art shows and stuff. I'll have people ask me if I could do this, do a presentation, teach a demonstration, you know, those sort of things and stuff. It's just good visibility, you know, it at least shows people that I'm there, what I can do, what I can maybe help them with.
Have you taught a lot of workshops? Whether
I've taught a few, you know, mostly the grade school level. Last year I had the Choctaw Nakoma Park schools ask me if I'd come in and do a class on loom work.
Wow.
And they had a good turnout. They had there was probably like 25, 30 people there. I mean, you know, parents with their kids and stuff, and we had at least a dozen looms. And we worked with pony beads because obviously that's a little bit easier to handle. And twine. I mean, you know, you can teach those hand. I don't want to use the word crafts because I feel like crafts sometimes is an undervalued term. I mean, you know, it's a shortened form of master craftsman.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to learn in a simplified way to do that. And that's what we did. I'll have an opportunity to teach in November at the History Center on gorge stitch.
Mm-hmm.
So those opportunities are there for me to take advantage of.
What do you learn when you're teaching?
You know, to be able to explain it in such a way that they can take that with them and continue. You know, I don't want them to be frustrated, because if you're frustrated with something, you're not gonna want to do it. You know, and I want those people to learn. You know, I think you can learn how to do anything. You know, if you choose to.
You mentioned you might be expanding your shows a bit. Have you gone to see Sam at all?
Yes, I have.
When was your first time?
2 years ago.
2 years ago. What was that like?
That was a great show for me. I placed first in beadwork.
Wonderful.
And then last year I also placed first in beadwork also. So obviously, you know, that's always at the top of the list of my good shows.
Yes.
You know, when you place. I also placed second in drawing in their categories there also. So good shows. I'm set to go again.
Is there a show that you're looking at that you haven't done yet this year that you're considering?
I've been asked if I've done Santa Fe, and it's like, no, you know, I understand it's real hard to get on out there and stuff, and it's like, it's probably on my list of something to look at. Been thinking maybe I need to expand beyond Oklahoma, you know, on doing that. I'm kind of, you know, I'm a planner. I don't have to rush into it. You know, if it's the time is right, then that's when I need to do it. So the opportunities are there. I just need to figure out the time to make sure I have things done. You know, beadwork and takes a little while.
Yeah,
you know,
you need that
one bead at a
inventory.
time. Yeah, exactly. You've got to have inventory to go into a show. Plus the competition side of it, you got to have a good competition piece too.
Mm-hmm. You know, you work in so many media. What is your favorite thing to make right now?
I still enjoy beadwork and I still enjoy drawing. I do like the clay, and talking with Chase, he was talking about the fact that the Caddos were well known for their baskets. And I did, fortunately there was a class at the Botech that it was like, well, she's teaching basket making. So this past spring and fall and winter have been really busy with picking up the clay and picking up basket making, and then still trying to get ready for competition and all the other things that I enjoy doing.
That's amazing. So the Votech here in Choctaw? Or?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, they actually offered a basket weaving class.
Who taught it?
Her name was Julie, and I can't remember her last name now, but she's Cherokee. Wasn't anybody that I recognized, seeing at any of the art markets. I think she picked it up by the fact that she just enjoys doing it. And so I learned how to make a double-walled basket and a Cherokee basket and just a basic little planner, but it was good, and now it's like, okay, we worked with reeds. I got to find cane river reeds and stuff, which is another indication of material availability not being there.
I don't know if you've ever made, say, moccasins that somebody was going to put in a picture box, but what is the difference for you in making items that people use and wear?
I have made Quapaw moccasins and Second Fox and Kiowa moccasins. Interesting enough, the lady that asked me to make the Quapaw moccasins, she wanted to have them ready for when she passed away. And I had to think long and hard on that one, because generally you make those up when someone has passed away. And I went to visit her and talk to her and her son, and I said, I have a hard time, doing something like this for you because of the timing on it. She goes, but I want to have them to be ready. And she laughed. She goes, and I'm not planning on going anyplace real soon. And I said, okay. So I did make those up for that lady and stuff. Most of the moccasins and stuff that I make are for people that dance. A good friend of mine, she wanted Kiowa moccasins for her grandchildren for the July celebrations, the Taipei, and I made those up for her. Another young lady with the Second Fox, her grandmother, she goes, I would like these moccasins. She says, I want some. I need another pair. I'm wearing my grandmother's and they're wearing out. And I said, well, let me take a look at them, and because the construction's different. We're Second Fox, they're a southeastern style, they're soft sole, versus the Kiowa style, which are hard sole. And looking at the construction, that kind of laughed, is like, they've got bigger ears. And so I ended up making those for her, fully beaded ears and stuff. And I wish they hadn't been a commission piece, because they would have been great for competition. They turned out beautiful. And I know, when I like to make sure what I do is beautiful. So I was very proud of those.
In terms of dance clothes, can you explain a little bit what makes the Caddo men's shirt a little bit different from the traditional ribbon shirt?
A Caddo men's shirt has tucks and ribbons in the yoke. You shouldn't call it a yoke, but it's more of an inset piece. And actually in the construction, it has that's inset in there, and later, what I've seen in photographs and stuff, they have a collar, which tells me that the collar is more modern than very old, because most of the old shirts didn't have collars. Because of that yoke and the tucks and stuff, that's what you can define a Caddo men's shirt and stuff. And those are kind of tough to make and stuff, because you got to make sure you get those tucks just right. And that inset, the placket that goes in the middle there too, if you cut it too wide for that opening, then you're going to have to start over.
Wow.
You don't want to
Yeah,
mess
I
them up
thought
and
they
stuff.
looked a little bit more difficult.
But I started making those for my sons, and so now they have the collarless versions because I wanted to make sure that when my son straight danced, you could tell that they had Caddo shirts underneath their straight dance regalia and stuff.
What do you think is the least understood aspect of Caddo culture?
I think that a lot of people don't realize that we still have as many dances as what we do. Our own traditional dances, and I make a difference between Caddo dances and powwows. Powwows are very intertribal. You have to know some of your tribal history of other tribes to know that there's certain aspects of powwows that come from different tribes. Caddo dances, we don't have head staff. We don't start early in the afternoon. We start late afternoon. Turkey dance has to end before sundown. We dance real late into the night. We used to dance. We have a morning dance, and I remember being as a young girl that doing morning dance, and the sun was coming up after dancing all night. Now, we sing morning dance songs probably about 3 or 4 in the morning because people are tired and they're starting to go home. So, in our clothing, just the story about the little girl telling me my comb was on backwards. They don't realize that that's a Caddo dress that you're wearing. And maybe it's confusing because of the full collar blouse being a southeastern style. The Kickapoos and the Shawnee and the Delaware all wear that full collar blouse. Now, if we're wearing our one-piece dress, it's definitely what they call prairie style. But it's still different than some of the other styles of clothing that you see other tribes wear.
Right. Well, let's talk a little bit more about your process and techniques for some of the media. You're mostly exploring pencil and charcoal, I guess, and you're doing some painting in acrylics. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Not any oils or anything.
I took the oil classes, in art school, at the university, art, acrylics and painting, oils and watercolor. And I remember watercolors was like, I'm trying to paint with acrylics, it wasn't as thin. I'd like to go back and try watercolor again. I'm always interested in trying to do something better.
And you like representing people. Do you take photographs?
Sometimes I do. I work with photographs that I've taken or old photographs that I come across. And I do animals. I do have illustrations of animals. One of the, I did an illustration of a wolf, and that was based on one of the Caddo creation stories. And I was involved with the Caddo Museum Board, and at that time, we were getting ready to put in the Caddo section at the Native American Art Gallery in the Oklahoma History Center. And the museum director asked me, she goes, why don't you illustrate one of our, the Caddo creation stories? And so I did, and it happened to be the one about the wolf crying, because when they came out of the earth, they were cautioned not to turn around, and Tasha, wolf, Caddo for wolf, he turned around and the earth closed up. And so that's why it's a wolf with tears in his eyes.
I saw that on your website. That was a really powerful picture. How do you think your approach to even drawing with pencil or charcoal has changed over the years?
I think my skills gotten better as far as thinking about what I'm representing. What's important to show in that. It's real hard to say. Sometimes now that you put it that way, it's like my skill has always been there. I had that lapse where I didn't do any drawing or painting because of, professional and raising a family, and then all of a sudden, I started picking it up again. It was like 20 years before I picked up, a paintbrush or a pencil to actually draw again. And I was pleased that the skill was still there. It's just a matter of, what I was going to do with it.
Right. What about your beadwork? How do you think that's changed? Maybe your colors or...
I've always kind of liked that bright color. I always wanted to know that if someone looked at it, they would be able to say, well, that's Yonavea's. I don't necessarily use real traditional, and interesting enough with beadwork, looking at being in Oklahoma, we have a lot of Plains tribes. You see some florals, and doing some research and stuff, looking back at what they would have used for their inspiration, those natures of elements are always around us. And so those are the influence on the beadwork and stuff. So I do have probably some plain style in there, but I also try to keep some of that floral in there also. But it's real interesting when you look at beadwork. If you don't know, they use both. Both Plains and Southeastern have both combinations of geometrics and florals.
Do you draw out your designs ever?
Yes, I do. I do draw out a lot of my designs. I graph them out, use colored pencil, not always in the colors that I'm going to actually bead. When I get started on a project, a beading project, the design changes. I don't always go off my design patterns that I've done. Working on bracelets, sometimes I'll just start it with the design and colors. I've been doing it enough now that I don't always have to have that graph. And of course with beadwork, there's the loom work as well as the overlay and the 2-needle applique work.
Right.
And so I do both of those as well as cord stitch too.
Right.
It's one worked into the other. With the boys wanting to have dance clothes, it's like, well, I guess I have to make fans. So I taught myself on how to cord stitch. And then it's like, okay, the moccasins need to have the beadwork on the toes, so there came the applique work.
Right, right.
One leads to the other.
And I didn't notice if you do any like finger weaving at all or not.
I have been wanting to learn. When I start that learning process of something new, I start gathering in research materials. As you probably can tell, I have a lot of books, and there's even more in my bedroom. But I keep a lot of books, and I look for old books, books that are out of print and stuff to look at those things that you don't see anymore. And that's where I get my ideas of, it's like, well, this used to be made this way. And so I have a collection of finger weaving books. I've sat down with Tyra a few times. I got a chance to meet her about 2 years ago at Red Earth, and she let me weave with her belts. One of the belts, she had one of her looms and stuff. And it's like, okay, I've got the materials, I've got the yarn, I just need to find that time to get in there and do that. While doing research, I noticed that Caddo women had beaded belts on with yarn tassels. That's something you don't see anymore. And so for CSAM this past year, I thought, I'm going to do a beaded belt with yarn as being, part of the loom work. And so I did that. So that was a good experience for me, and it's my first belt, so it won't be for sale.
You might have to bring back that.
Yes, I'm going to. I've worn it, and I've started also buying finger weaving belts for myself, because that's one of those style things that just kind of faded out.
Right. How many Deshto, am I saying that right, makers are there, do you think, in the area?
Probably not very many. I'd be surprised if there's a handful. Interesting enough, with dust shoes, they've changed over time, because at one time, the way they would wear them, there was a bag at the bottom of that. It's kind of an hourglass or butterfly shaped piece, if you want to term it that way, that they would gather their hair into, and then that would secure their hair back. With time, we put a clip on there or a ribbon and tie it on or clip it on and stuff. But probably a handful, and interesting, they're really not that hard to make. It just takes the time of putting those colors together and making sure they're layers of ribbons. Material availability, it's real hard to find 6-inch wide ribbon. Or silk or taffeta. Those materials are expensive to come by, or they're hard to find. So you kind of, you learn how to put those ribbons together so they lay nice and flat and still give that flowing look that they have when the wind catches them.
So when you're shopping for supplies, do you prefer to order online, or do you like to go do stuff hands-on?
All of them. And if I find a source online, then I will order it. If I find a source that I can go in and look at, then I will do so. With beads, you kind of know the colors, so you can kind of order those online. I order from all over. When I'm looking for beads, I found one company that would come to Red Earth, and it was like, I like their beads, so I'd buy a bunch of beads. Well, they didn't come one year, and I had an order for a particular color of beads, and it was like,
oh.
And then 2 years later, I found another source for that same color of beads. So I buy a lot of beads to make sure I can get through a couple of projects.
I know that's where artist profits go.
Yes, making sure you have an inventory of supplies.
You sort of, I think, touched on this already, but do you think there's a difference between bead art and bead craft? And if there is, how would you define it?
With the moccasins that I do and stuff, I've had people say those would be too pretty to wear. But because they're pretty, you want to wear them. Crafts, if it's just a simple project, then maybe I'd call it crafts, but crafts still take a skill to be able to do it well. I work for a decorative painting publishing company, and a lot of that's considered crafts. Well, there's still a skill there to be able to handle a paintbrush, to be able to put those colors together in a pleasing manner. Crafts is always not a good word, but it just kind of comes in handy. Art, it's a matter, I think, of the eye of the beholder on art, what's considered art. Art's always considered drawing and painting. Doing beadwork, it's a skill. To be able to put those things together and for people to appreciate it. It's an art form, it really is. And to be able to do that, to make it pleasing, to make it look good.
You mentioned, in terms of research, the old books, a lot of times out of print books. What other things do you do?
Creatively, or
just for research maybe, or to get.
I'm always curious of what's out there and stuff, and learning more about my heritage. As a young person, I didn't ask, and maybe it wasn't always explained. It was just assumed that you would know it and learn it. I've had to do more research because of being asked to give presentations, to be more knowledgeable about who I am, where I come from, and those things that make me Caddo, in Delaware and Kickapoo, and knowing learning the language, and just all those things coming together, puts a different perspective on what you need to know, and try to make sure that you present it as accurately as possible as you can. We're all human when we make mistakes and don't remember things as well as we should, but you've got to keep learning.
Mm-hmm. When you're working, full time and balancing your artwork, how do you do that? Do you relegate certain times on the weekend? What's your creative routine?
I usually, and this is where my husband comes in being supportive, I don't cook anymore. He steps in and, makes sure the house is cleaned up, and does the grocery shopping and prepares meals. He makes sure I eat, because sometimes I get busy and forget. and and so he allows me that time in the evenings to be able to spend a couple hours, 2 or 3 hours in the evenings to work on what I do. Weekends the same way, I enjoy dancing and going to the art markets and stuff, and so I have to balance my schedule on, my creative time. I've got to have time to create, but I also want to have that time to have some fun too. Mm-hmm. I'm a cancer survivor, and so that puts a different perspective on what's important. Having a clean house is not on the list of my priority of things to do.
Thank you for sharing that. What is your creative process from the time that you get an idea?
When I'll be thinking about things. It's like, okay, I need to think about what I'm going to do for a competition. Competition side of it's kind of important because you put that money out for a booth. You want to make sure you have inventory for sales. If you do a competition piece, then it kind of takes off the sales part of it. It kind of gives you a relief knowing that, okay, I've covered my booth fees, I've covered my meals, I've covered my hotel expenses. So I start thinking about, okay, what can I do that's going to be creative? Sometimes with the competition piece, more than likely it's something for myself, because you're not supposed to sell commission pieces. It's got to be something you create. Sometimes my creative process, I'll be thinking about something when I'm driving to work or going someplace. I'll be thinking about, okay, what do I need to do? What would be a good thing to do? And then once the concept is there, it's like, okay, what is it going to be? What are the elements of the design and the colors? They just kind of roll around in my head sometimes, just, at odd times and stuff. I don't wake up during the night, with that. I've got to be awake doing something else, and it'll just kind of pop in my head. I was driving someplace, and a concept for a painting popped into my head, and I still haven't put it down on a canvas or anything like that, but the concept's there, and they just kind of get filed away until I get a chance to bring them out.
Just mentally, you don't have to write them down?
No, they don't. It'll be a cool piece when I get ready to do it.
You don't have to say what it is, but do you already know what you're going to do for Red Earth then?
Actually, I'm still kind of trying to get that nailed down. I do have an idea. Um, it's a matter of starting to do the beadwork on it, which, you know, when we're going to these out of town trips and stuff, my husband will drive and I will be beading. He kind of laughs because she's always beading in the car. I don't take my loom, but I can do gourd stitch and I can do the 2-needle applique stitch in the car and not poke myself. But, you know, on that trip I'll be working on my Red Earth project.
He's so supportive. Do you like to listen to music when you work, or TV, or just?
I listen to TV, and it can't be anything that I hadn't seen before because it's too distracting. You know, the noise is there, but if it's something new, then it kind of, it's like I got to change it to something old. Don't mind the noise. I do like having music on and stuff when I'm working. Also, I'll put in anything from Powwow CDs to, you know, Caddo music to language tapes, just whatever. And then, you know, I'm so absorbed in what I'm working on that, you know, it's not even running anymore. You know, and I used to have my table toward the door and stuff, and I turned it around because my husband would come in there and say something to me, and I'd jump 2 feet in the air because I'm so absorbed in what I'm doing.
Oh, well, I know you haven't been, you know, back in the circuit, the art circuit, for all that long, but just looking back on this decade that you've been showing your artwork and winning prizes and stuff, what was a fork in the road when you could have gone one way but you decided to go another?
You know, it goes back to when Jerry said to do the co-op. You know, I could have not taken that step and not participated, because that's what started doing the art markets and being involved. You know, I said something about being a cancer survivor. At that time, going through that whole process of not knowing whether you're going to live or die, a lot of reflection of what I would do with myself if I did live. And thinking back of, you know, it's like God was telling me that, you know, there's things that you need to be doing. You know, you've got these skills and these talents. You need to be using them. And because I didn't always put those things to the back. And going on from that point, knowing that, you know, once I regained my health and started feeling normal again, that, you know, there's things I need to be doing. You know, and that's where it comes from.
And looking back on your career so far, what's been one of the high points?
I think just participating, just there. You know, right now I enjoy everything I do. Some of the things that have come from it, the opportunities, I would have never thought that I would be talking to people about what I do. It's fun, you know, it's exciting. You know, I'm thankful that I'm here to be able to do those sort of things. You know, it's just opportunities that God's given me to take advantage of, to use.
And looking back on your career so far, what's been one of the low points?
You know, I don't think there's ever really been a low point as career-wise and stuff. Professionally, I've had a lot of opportunities to transition from being, you know, a commercial artist, graphic designer. I've had some exciting projects when I did that. We worked for publishing companies, gained experience from that. I worked for advertising agencies, print buyer, and just different parts of that have always led me from one thing to another, just different opportunities. So I really can't say professionally or on my work experience versus my artist experience. I think I've always been blessed with a lot of high points.
Is there anything else you'd like to add or talk about before we take a look at your work?
I don't think so.
All right, well, let's look at your drawings and your clothing.
Okay.
All right, what would you like to tell us about this?
This picture is a charcoal drawing, and it is of my great-grandmother, Lizzie Williams. And I had a Xerox copy of a black and white photo of hers. It was probably about a 5x7. And that's what I took this charcoal drawing of. And for competition, they always ask for the name of the piece. And so sometimes while I'm working on a piece, a name will come to me. Sometimes it doesn't. This particular one, because it was important to me, the name didn't come. Oh. And what I do is I'll set a piece out in the dining room on the buffet table there, and so I can walk past it and kind of keep it in mind of that, I want to name a piece. And also, while I'm driving, I come up with names of pieces too. But this one, I noticed that her eyes, it's one of those pieces where the eyes follow you from left to right, whichever side you're on, her eyes follow you. So I titled it Grandmother's Watching, because of her eyes moving. I'm not for sure, but I think this picture was actually taken at Moreau's Dance Ground, which is a very old Caddo dance ground. I think we've been dancing there 100 years at least, somewhere pretty close in that mark, and I may be off by a few years, but I think that's when this picture was taken.
And you can pick out the figures in the background as well.
Yes, yeah. So I know it was at a dance, and you can tell it's like it's early 40s. Somewhere in that time frame there.
That is really neat. So you want to talk to us about your moccasins and your bag there? Beautiful.
These are Caddo moccasins, and I had titled these Hasine Princess, which means Caddo Princess. I really liked the particular colors that I chose. These are the size 9 2-cut beads. They're not check beads. They're not size 13s. And the reason why is because, when dancing, you're seen across the arena. Not up close and stuff. And I just like those colors. Some of the Caddo designs and stuff, they kind of show it's not quite a diamond pattern. This is more stylized. But I liked the colors in doing the diamond pattern. And one of my great aunts would carry a turtle purse and stuff, and I'd see them and I thought, I'd like to do that, and so that's why I started doing turtle purses and stuff. That's a little bit more elaborate than probably what they did years ago, but powwow styles have kind of changed. They've gone a lot brighter and stuff, so that's why you've got the brighter colors. I do keep in mind of what is traditional. This is more, the ribbon work on the side is made from taffeta, which is real hard to find taffeta, and taffeta just folds differently than some of the other fabrics that you can work with and stuff, and it's really pretty durable and stuff too. And this actually has velvet on the ears too.
Oh, it's beautiful.
So I don't know if I'll wear these or not.
Yeah, they're just gorgeous.
I need something for I need to have something to display in my booth and stuff. So I'll probably continue carrying these around for several more years and stuff until I decide that I think they've served their purpose for being on display, and I'll start wearing them.
And then you can start wearing them. So this is the belts that you're going to bring back, we hope.
Yes, yeah, beaded belts. Like I said, I'd seen in old photographs that some of the Caddo women were wearing beaded belts. And so with that in mind, I had to think about building my beading loom longer to accommodate the yarn you need for the tassel part of it.
Right.
And I do make my own looms for all my beadwork and stuff. You know, I don't use a commercial loom. I learned that process from Martin Wariakwi, Junior Wariakwi. He was a bead maker and stuff. In fact, he encouraged me, you know, and actually showed me how.
Influence.
Yeah, he actually showed me how on his looms. You know, showed me his looms, and so I found them to be better than commercial looms. So with that in mind, I could make a loom big enough to accommodate this style of belt. You know, it's not size 13 beads, it's size 11 cut beads because of the yarn, and I had to look for really thin yarn so that it wouldn't hide the beads, you know. So that was a learning process in itself and stuff. But I look forward to making more of these. This one actually took me about 80 hours.
Oh, wow.
To do.
And those are some neat designs, and they look like combinations, sort of.
My first beaded belt that I made for myself, you know, I'm talking about a commercial belt, you know, commercial belt, and then the beadwork that they sew onto it and stuff. This is my first beadwork design.
Wow.
So this is, you know, it's kind of like my personal design and stuff.
Right. Okay, so here we have your Caddo clothing.
Yes, this dress is a two-piece Caddo dress, and it has a full collar, and on the full collar dresses they had lots of washer brooches.
Right.
So it's got some washer brooches on it, and as time goes by I'll add more. It just takes a little while to accumulate that many washer brooches to go around a full collar of a Caddo dress. They have a full skirt. You know, Caddos also wear a one-piece, and it doesn't have the full collar. One of the things we also wear with our two-piece dresses is a beaded collar, and of course I don't have one right here with it. But one of the other things that makes it distinctive for Caddo women is that we have a dush-tu. And that is a headdress that you wear on the back of your head. And when I'd seen some earlier museum examples and stuff, they had a row of silver washers going down the center of them, and they're layers of ribbons that are stacked. Nowadays, of course, it's hard to find the wider ribbon. Silk ribbon, of course, is even harder to find. And so I use layers of ribbons and, you know, narrower, and have to combine those together to create that effect. Part of the things about the dush-tu is that a long time ago they used to have a bag at the bottom of them, and they would tuck their hair inside that bag, and then, you know, it was tied on with their hair enclosed. Nowadays they, you know, put a ribbon on there or a hair clip on the back of the dush-tu and just, you know, put it into their hair that way instead of gathering it into a bag.
Right. Oh, it's a beautiful dush-tu too. Okay, and we're looking at this last piece of artwork, which is a pencil drawing, I guess.
Yes, this one is pencil. I had come across an old photograph of a Kickapoo man, and you can tell that he's young, you know, and he's young, but he's also has two feathers, two eagle feathers. So I titled this one a Kickapoo Warrior. And he's got a beautiful eagle fan, and I really like the expression on his face, and just some of the detail that I could see in that photo on his clothing and stuff. I liked the way that the beadwork was done on that eagle wing. And have given some thought to Caddo women carry turkey feathers. You know, we'll use the wings and stuff, and I thought, you know, I might do that for a turkey fan, you know, for the wing. You know, emulate that, the way that beadwork is done and stuff. And of course, that's another example of how they do that, and I've got to figure out how.
Right. And your signature is in there, just very subtle.
Yeah, I'm kind of discreet on my signature. I sign it with my first name, just Yonavea, because, you know, I feel and know that Yonavea is a very unique name. In my college days, because my maiden name was Gunn, I would do kind of a stylized Gunn, and then, you know, got married, and of course, you know, I didn't didn't really want to get into doing a hawk as for a short form of Hawkins, and so I've just kept it to Yonavea.
Well, it just is a beautiful drawing, and I thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you very much for asking me.